This podcast may contain subject matter that some listeners may find disturbing or harmful. Audience discretion is advised.
Giving free one-sided therapy to the stars of reality. It's Rachel and Kacie with CBT and the TV. CBT and the TV.
Hello, darlings, dears, and fellow queers, and welcome back to CBT and the TV. As always, I am Kacie, not Rachel.
And I am Rachel, not Kacie.
And this week, we will be going over Dance Moms Season 1, Episode 10, Kathy Brings It On. This episode is particularly interesting because if you really pay attention, there's only 3 days worth of filming that's shown. They do day 1, day 3, and then competition day. And that's it. So it made for an interesting time documenting things to give us the overview for this episode. Before we really jump into things, let's also check in with our snacks and drinks for the day and remind all of our friends and listeners to feed and hydrate themselves because their bodies are important. Rachel, what do you have with you today?
Well, I am throwing it way back to early childhood, and I have fruit snacks and apple juice.
I have goldfish. I don't have apple juice, though. I have my energy drink and then my emotional support water bottle because... All right, let's get going. We opened the episode with the team already in LA. And as the girls file out of the van in front of the studio that they're going to be using for the week, Abby tells us in voiceover that she is expecting big things from Hollywood this week and that she's rented the studio that Britney Spears and Lady Gaga use for the week because nothing is too good for her girls. Nothing except, kindness and basic human decency. Abby calls the girls in for Pyramid and she does this by blowing like a coach's whistle. And I was just like, who gave her that? No, straight to timeout. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Absolutely not. And she tells the girls that they are here to attend the I Hollywood National Finals. And I love the way that they kind of brushed over this the whole episode. They're at a nationals, but they're, they can't be at nationals because nationals for them is next week. Abby starts talking about how Melissa isn't here because she made her choices and she chose her boyfriend. And she says this in front of everyone, and she starts talking directly to Maddie in Pyramid, saying that Melissa chose her boyfriend instead of being here with you. And she's saying all of this while Mackenzie is standing right next to Maddie, but she's using Maddie's name. She's directing all of this right toward Maddie. Every time you think Abby can't get any ickier, you should stop thinking that because she's gonna one-up herself. And she also says that Maddie and Mackenzie will be staying with her for the week. I want to know what we think about Abby talking about Melissa in this way, especially in front of all of the kids and all of the moms.
I mean, I have worked with kids who say, my parent chose their boyfriend or girlfriend over me. And it is significant for these kids who are coming to me and talking to it. So the fact that Abby is almost telling them this is what
Abby's
happened.
Using those words.
Your mom is choosing her boyfriend over you. You're not that important.
Yes.
It's gross.
It worried me specifically that she kept singling Maddie out, especially with it. Don't get me wrong. It would have been just as insidious if Maddie had been standing next to Chloe and then 5 girls down, Mackenzie standing next to Brooke. But the fact that they were standing right next to each other and Abby kept saying, Maddie, she chose to be somewhere else instead of being with you. Maddie, she chose her boyfriend instead of being here with you. It felt so much worse, simultaneously worse for Maddie and for Mackenzie because it's Mackenzie erasure, hashtag Mackenzie erasure. And also, I feel like it's encouraging Maddie to rely even more on Abby. It's Abby subtly saying, you can't trust anyone except for me. You can't trust your friends. You can't trust their moms. You can't even trust your mom. It's just me. Abby then goes on to tell the whole group that because Maddie and Kenzie will be with her for the week, that they might get to do things that the rest of the children will not get to do. And she tells us in an interview that all of those things that go into being a parent, those are the things that Melissa trusts her to do for Maddie and Mackenzie.
I mean, Abby, I think in a way, like, she's more of like anti-vibe. Like, she does not have that nurturing thing. It's like, oh, the baby is crying. I think it needs its diaper changed. Here you go, and like hands off the problem. But she'll embrace all of the good times because that's what she wants.
Yes, but
She doesn't want to deal with the mess.
outside of that, like Abby saying this, and again, don't get me wrong, production could have told Abby to say this, but because of the other things we know about Abby, I could also see her just saying this of her own volition. And what it says to me is Abby feels like she has control over the situation. She views herself as one of, like, she views herself as a co-parent to Maddie and Mackenzie, and it worries me.
Mm-hmm.
Abby finally moves on to the pyramid, and she reveals that the lowest 2 places on the pyramid have gone to Paige and Brooke, and she makes it very clear that this is because of what happened last week with Paige's solo and Kelly's response to it. She says that she won't be giving either of the Highland girls a solo this week, and she also tells Paige and Brooke that if Kelly decides to hire an outside choreographer, which, by the way, is what Abby told her to do. She told Kelly to do that. They won't be allowed to be in the group number. Kelly tells us in an interview, and this interview feels very produced, that this is a very important week, and she wants to make sure that she gets Paige seen. So if she has to hire an outside choreographer in order for that to happen, that's just what she's going to do. Kelly has also said on the Back to the Bar podcast that she had nothing to do with hiring the outside choreographer that will make an appearance in this episode. This was 100% production, just like Brooke and Brandon going to the fun spot. Just like next on the pyramid are Kenzie and Nia, and we find out that they're going to have a duet together this week, and they look very excited for it, and we're all very happy about this. Next up on the pyramid is Chloe, and Abby does not say much about what she thought of what happened last week with Chloe, and I cannot tell if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but she does tell us that Chloe will have another solo this week. And at the top of the pyramid this week is
Maddie.
But unlike last week, when Chloe was on the top of the pyramid after having a week off, we're supposed to be completely unsurprised by the fact that Maddie had a week off and is now back on the pyramid. What could the other girls be hearing from this? And also, what do we think Maddie was hearing from this? Like, do we think they were internalizing any of it? Do you think they got?
I mean, I hope that they wouldn't internalize any of it because it's bullshit.
Yeah,
but it's like, you know, it doesn't matter how hard you work. Somebody is going to be on top because it's going to be handed to them. Like, that's kind of what I bet. You know, if I were in a position of like Chloe or Nia, I'd be like, okay, she didn't really do anything. Yeah, sure, she was part of the group, but
so was
didn't
I.
really do anything, and I did a whole lot of work this week. And conversely, Maddie would be like, oh, I don't have to do much to be on top.
Abby goes on to tell Maddie that she's going to have a solo this week, obviously, but that she needs to remember that she is undefeated so far this season and that people will be out to get her. She's also going to say stuff like this to Maddie for the rest of the rest of forever. People are out to get you. People want to,
which is very much a narcissistic belief.
Oh yes,
that
absolutely.
You are part of an elite group and everyone is against you.
Abby dismisses everyone from Pyramid, telling them that they need to keep in mind that this is a very big week and that the judges will be very important people and that they need to be ready to step on the stage like pros. We head into rehearsal and find out that this week's group routine is a jazz number called My Pumps. And Abby says it's a very LA piece. It's very Hollywood. And we also notice that the moms are sitting in on the rehearsal. It doesn't appear as though the studio had a lot of extra space, like a lobby that they could turn into their own dance jail. And I can only imagine that being stuck in the same room with Abby and Gia and the girls rehearsing for hours on end, that had to have like elevated the feeling of dance jail from like dance lockup to dance prison. As Abby begins working with some of the girls a little bit more individually, the moms do get a chance to like start talking quietly in between each other, and they all are saying like they can't believe that Melissa isn't with them. This conversation felt, I'm sure the producers wanted them to talk about it, and I'm sure that the moms all had feelings about it, and they're entitled to their feelings. But this isn't the kind of thing I love that production made people talk about and then put on television. Melissa's choices for her family are Melissa's choices to make and then deal with later. They're not fodder for television. And this is gross. Production adds on to it by every time the moms say like, well, what if she had to do this because, you know, this whole situation is about money and she has to be with the boyfriend because money. And then production's like, oh, we'll put in a clip from earlier in the season where Melissa says that her boyfriend's the one that signs the dance checks. And it's very gross. And I'm not saying the moms are gross. I'm saying production is gross. The moms then move on to talking about Brooke and Paige being at the bottom of the pyramid. Kelly says she's over it. She's no longer surprised. Kelly tells the moms that she has found a couple of good choreographers that are reputable and she'll do what she has to do. Abby then tells the girls that they're going to have a special guest, and she introduces Shangela Laquifa Wadley.
Yes.
Shangela graces us with her presence, and unlike last week's guest, she is completely prepared to be here with these kids. Abby tries to, you know, say like, this is what we're going to do. She tries to spin the whole thing in an interview about this being an opportunity for Nia to see a Black diva and learn about her heritage. And if you want to hear all of the nasty things that Abby says about Shangela's Laquifa or Shangela, is that this isn't her first rodeo. She appears on Toddlers and Tiaras with her goddaughter. She does, I don't know that she's known for working with children, but she's definitely, this isn't her first rodeo when it comes.
She's not unfamiliar.
Yeah, she's been around kids a time or 10. She knows what she's doing, and she's excited to be there working with these little kids, and she understands what age group she's there with. She immediately starts talking with the kids, and she also doesn't start going into like an overview of the history of drag. She's not talking about like what it's like being backstage at a drag show, because that's not going to be appropriate for Mackenzie. She goes, look, Miss Abby has me here to talk to you about performance art and being sickening. And all of the girls are so excited.
I think it's important to note too, with current legislation for our listeners, the way that Shangela presented herself, there was no, like, you could not sexualize that interaction in any way, shape, or form. She was there as an entertainer, as a character, and the fact that, you know, current laws are like, oh, kids shouldn't be exposed to that. Like, this, do they not know? Like, they just need to be Shangela.
If absolutely anything, last week's guest was far more inappropriate with these children. Shangela does not talk about she doesn't even really talk about drag.
She talks about performance.
She talks about performance, which is at its core what drag is about. She goes on to teach Nia a very specific move called the death drop. And within drag, they have their own styles of dancing, two particular styles that are very big called voguing and whacking. The death drop is part of whacking. And this will become a signature move for Nia for the rest of her time on Dance Moms. And she breaks it down in such a developmentally appropriate way for Nia to do it safely and also learn to execute it in minutes. This was a beautiful experience, and I am so glad and grateful that all of the children, but especially Nia, got to have this experience. Unfortunately, we cannot stay in something beautiful and lovely and fantastic forever. We have to head to Ohio. At her super duper fancy studio, Kathy is telling us that after their time with the ALDC, they came back home and just really thought that it was time for them to show Abby what they're made of. And I do want to preface this by reminding everyone that Kacie wanted to be done with the show at this point. She didn't want to continue, but she had a contract to do the first season. And so the only way she was able to return home to her students was if she allowed them to film at her studio. However, I do not know how this then ended up with her being on this show
Multiple
for
seasons.
years to come. So I believe that she didn't want to continue filming at a certain point during season 1, but I don't think that excuses her continuing to be on the show. Eventually, Kacie, you have to admit you liked some of it.
I think that she sharing the camera with somebody else. I bet that's what she didn't like about it.
She has Vivi and Justice working on a duet that I thought, I was like, oh, I hope that this gets better, because what she has them working on when we first show up looks like something that your kids might make up when you have the cousins over and they're like, oh, we gotta really put together a wowzer of a dance so that they let us have a sleepover. They're hyped up on Hi-C juice boxes and they're really trying to impress you.
That's a great way to describe it.
It's true. They're playing air guitar and
So
she's like
true.
critiquing how their heads are bobbing. And it's not choreographed head bobbing, okay? We move on from that duet to Taylor's solo. And Kacie tells Taylor and her mom that she went online and found Chloe's solo music and that they're going to use the same song just to mess with them. Obviously, we know that this was production, but I just doubt that Kacie didn't enjoy some aspect of it. And I also want to point out that this was a crappy thing to do to both Chloe and Taylor. Like,
it directly compares them.
It directly compares them, and ultimately, this show features the ALDC as the heroes. So what's this going to do to Taylor? This is her first solo on national television. This was a shitty thing to do to that kid. She could be immensely talented and it could have been a beautiful dance and no one's going to remember it. And that's on production, but Kacie, you could have done something else. Back in Hollywood, we're in group rehearsal still, and Abby gets a phone call notifying her that her mom has been admitted to the hospital. Understandably, this throws Abby for a loop, and we do want to remember that they have been on the road for 4 weeks straight, and that they have been in three time zones in as many weeks. She does not know what to do. She calls Gianna into the hallway. I hate that production caught this on camera and then kept it in the episode. I understand why they did. It's drama, but we can hear Abby telling Gianna, she's like, someone got me a plane ticket. I'm leaving after this. Can you help me figure out when I'm landing so I can tell my mom? You can hear her, like, she does not understand what time she's landing in Orlando. She's like, I need to tell my mom when I'm going to be at the hospital. And I don't know when that is.
They say that it takes 1 day for every time zone that you cross to adjust. But that also is kind of dependent on, like, if you're living in East Coast time and you're not thinking in West Coast time. Like, I have to do the math.
It takes 1 day per time zone if you're just existing, let alone if you have any stressors. And how many stressors does she have? Plus now her mom's in the hospital. Next up, Kelly brings Paige into another room in the dance studio to meet a choreographer named Mike Munich, who will be working on her solo for the week. And Kelly tells him that she just wants Paige to feel special. Back in the regular rehearsal room, Abby tells us that she knows exactly what Kelly is up to, and that in the 30 plus years Kelly's been at her studio, she's never really been loyal, and that Kelly's brand of loyalty reminds her of Kathy's brand of loyalty. And that just sets us up perfectly to head back to summer in Ohio. And back with Kacie, we're sitting in on a pep talk that she's giving to Justice and Vivi, and she's telling them that they really need to go out there and show Abby what they're made of. And I hope that they're made of better stuff than what Kacie was giving them earlier. She tells us in an interview that when they were with the ALDC, Vivi was not allowed to live up to her fullest potential in the dances that she was given there. Kacie, you were there for a few months, and Vivi only did a total of 4 dances if you want to include Where Have All the Children Gone? And I don't know that we want to include. She was in the dance, but she didn't dance. We go back to LA for a quick bit, and we're in solo rehearsal with Paige, where she tells us that she's really nervous for this solo because the new choreographer doesn't know her in the same way that Abby does, and she doesn't want Abby to get mad at her. I think all of this makes a lot of sense. It's very scary as an adult to stand up against a narcissist, but it's even more terrifying as a child. It's also, like, from a dance standpoint, working with a choreographer that knows you can put together a dance very quickly. When you meet a new choreographer, you need like 2 days just to show them all the stuff that you can do so they can think about it in their head and then put together a dance for you. Their production was expecting them to do this in a few hours.
I think they were expecting to do it like they expected the girls to learn their dances.
Yes. We head back to Ohio, where Kathy is working with Taylor on her solo, and she tells Taylor that using the same music as Chloe is really going to set them up for success. Sure it is. And we get a quick look at both Taylor and Chloe's solos in a side-by-side shot, because we're not comparing them at all, though. We're definitely not doing that. And we head straight from there into Chloe's solo rehearsal in LA. As Chloe is learning her solo, she tells us that her solo for the week is called Dream on a Star. This is one of my all-time favorite Chloe dances. This is one of the most quintessentially Chloe dances you're ever going to see. The acting is perfect. The details are incredible. Her costume is gorgeous. Everything about this dance. I wish she could have done it for years. She'd have won everywhere they went.
It's one of those that I'm like, sometimes revenge is the biggest motivator that makes things like top tier. It was like Chloe and Maddie switched dances.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. As Chloe's rehearsal wraps up, Abby tells all the moms that she's planning to be leaving soon to go be with her mom. And the moms are all expressing concern for Abby and for her mom. And they're asking Abby if there's anything they can do for her, if her mom's okay. And Abby, of course, just replies by snapping at them. No, she's not. I'm not. And in an interview, Abby starts another time-honored Dance Moms tradition, telling the moms and the girls that they have no idea how much time she sacrifices, how much of her life she sacrifices to be with them all the time. And a bombastic side eye. No one's making you do this but you. No, that's how it works. Next up is Maddie's solo rehearsal. Abby is talking with her about how this dance is going to be different from all of the other kinds of solos that Maddie has done in the past, that she really needs to utilize her acting skills. And I do wonder if Chloe had this solo, if Abby would have said, this is going to be different from all the other dances that you do. Because it's not.
Because it wouldn't have.
Maddie's dance for the week is called Disappeared, and Maddie will be portraying the victim of child abuse who eventually ends her own life. I want to know, Ray, what you think about Maddie having to portray this kind of character, especially at this age. And then also Abby giving her this solo on the week that her mom's not here. And Abby is telling her, your mom chose not to be here with you.
I noticed that that was a thing also, that there was an attempt to make it a theme there. It's a reality for kids that age.
Yeah.
I don't know that they need to necessarily be exposed to it if they're not. But it is a very real situation. It has a tendency, and I don't know if it's necessarily her production, but her dances tend to try to make a point and bring awareness.
Which can be a good thing.
And which, I mean, as an artist, like, you want people to look at your stuff and go, and pause and think about it.
And those can also
take it in.
They can be the most fun to choreograph. As someone who choreographed dances, those can be the most fun, but they still have to be developmentally appropriate for the people you're choreographing them for.
Yes. I think it's a both and. I think because I know that children, even her age, sometimes struggle with suicidal ideation, I think it could technically be age appropriate because there are kids out there who struggle with that. But I don't know that we need to bring it to light if it's not necessarily there.
Pairing it with the abuse is where I really have an issue. Especially when we remind ourselves that Maddie was the second youngest on the team. After Vivi left, Maddie's the second youngest. You also have the ability to utilize Brooke, who looks a lot younger than she is.
I think too, though, Abby tends to parentify Maddie.
Oh yes,
She tends to
1,000,000%.
make her more of an adult than she is and treats her as more mature than she is. I think in part because Maddie does dance a bit more mature. So I think Abby sort of almost forgets how cognitively old Maddie is.
And I have such a problem with that. If you've got a kid who's exorbitantly taller than everyone else in your class, but that's just their genetics, and they're actually on the young side for your class, like your class is, let's say, 3 to 6 years old, and that kid's actually 3, but he is as tall as all the 6-year-olds, still functioning like a 3-year-old, but you get frustrated and you're like, oh my God, you're one of the big kids. And then you're like, no, he's just physically big. It's not actually a big kid. We all do that. We all make those human mistakes. My issue, particularly when it pertains to Abby, is she has to register all of her students week after week for all of these competitions. She's registering Maddie as a mini dancer. She knows how old Maddie is. She knows her birth date. And so it drives me absolutely batshit crazy that she has to internalize every one of her dancers' ages and know them so well that she knows their birthdays for when to change their age designation for a competition. But she still does this. Because I know that it's more than that. Like she just thinks of Maddie as this own special like magical being that can just handle all this stuff. But that at its core, that's the problem. Because she's not. She's still like the baby. One of the 2 babies of the team. And this week she's the baby without her mommy. And you're, ew. It's so disgusting to me. We joined Paige back in her solo rehearsal, and we can tell that Paige's anxiety is growing. And she's also starting to deteriorate. She's about to reach a breaking point. Kelly and the choreographer are trying to give her a boost. They're trying to cheer her on, but inevitably the whole thing is proving to be too much for her, and she inevitably breaks down in tears. Obviously, when you take into consideration that this whole thing was set up by production, Paige was forced to do it. She knew what was going on, and she's not allowed to talk about it. And Abby is holding it against her in real life, like while the cameras are there and while the cameras aren't there. I can't imagine being 10 and 13 and having this, imaginary pretend thing happening and being like, yeah, okay, we'll do the pretend thing. And then having one of the adults in your life treating you like you actually did something bad.
I have a friend who works in ED, and I feel like it's relevant kind of to this situation. But when she works with eating disorders, her phrase is, secrets keep you sick. So if you don't talk about it, it's just going to get worse. So being able to talk about it makes it better. And these kids can't talk about it.
Don't get me wrong, they might be able to go home at night and talk about it in their hotel rooms, but one of the things is these girls, they can't repair this with Abby because Abby's treating it like it's real. So for what Rachel just said, like that secret is going to keep that relationship sick. And particularly when it pertains to the Highland girls, this is a family friend. And now so Kelly has said that like the drama that happened in Dance Moms for them, like extended far outside of just Dance Mom. Paige heads to the restroom to calm down, and Kelly follows her. We can hear Kelly comforting Paige and telling her that if she doesn't want to do the dance, no one's going to make her. I do want to point out that production uses a lot of what happens in the bathrooms. And I don't know, I hadn't necessarily thought about it till this week, but now I'm just like, that is so gross. Back in the main rehearsal room, Abby tells us that no one wants a mediocre kid, but that she thinks that in this case, Kelly deserves it. Hearing an adult, like anything that Abby actually held against them in real life for this would be disgusting, but this is the kind of stuff that Abby was doing. She was calling them stupid and mediocre and lazy and selfish and bratty for stuff that they didn't do and had no choice in. This is also the start of another Dance Moms tradition. Abby loves to call the kids mediocre and stupid and not swift. Abby goes on to then say that as soon as Paige goes on stage and forgets her solo again, Kelly is going to regret her decision. I think this is particularly despicable because the last time this happened, Paige had a full tilt meltdown, completely understandably. It shattered a piece of Paige. Abby knows that, and she's wishing it on a 10-year-old again.
I think it's a revenge against her mom that she doesn't realize is impacting Paige either. Like, I think she knows that it impacts Paige, but a lot of times, especially when we have parents who are separated, something that we very often see is one parent using the kids as a weapon to hurt the other parent. And it feels very much like that with Abby. Abby knows that these parents love and value their kids so much, so the way to hurt the mom is to hurt the child.
I hate how much sense that makes. Group rehearsal resumes, and Abby starts going off on the moms, telling them that they all need to leave, and then she singles out Kelly, saying that you have no business being in here at all because your kids aren't even going to be a part of the group because of the solos and the outside choreographer. And
that Kelly didn't even hire.
Right, like the Kelly had, that's what I was going to say. I was like, this had to have really set Kelly off because we know that at this point Kelly was kind of done with Abby's bullshit anyway, but like Kelly's baloney-ometer is particularly well attuned to Abby, and she's like, I know that you know that I had nothing to do with this. And that you know that I can't talk about it right now. Stop it. So Kelly tries to fight back within the confines of what she's allowed to talk about because the cameras are rolling, and she tells Abby that Paige's solo has nothing to do with Brooke and Paige's ability to do the group dance and that her kids really just want to dance with their friends. And we're able to see Kelly getting a stress rash again as the conversation goes on. It's creeping up her chest. And Abby also insinuates throughout the argument that something is wrong with Brooke and Paige, that they're not swift. And the worst part of this to me is she's doing this in front of all of the kids and all of the moms. Brooke and Paige hear her say this. I want to know, Rachel, what you think the kids hearing all of this arguing could be doing to all of them overall, but especially to Brooke and Paige. Like when she yells about a single kid or calls them stupid in front of everyone, what's that doing to them?
I mean, it, like, putting myself in that situation, like, you know, me being called out makes me just like want to shrink, but I also then like feel bad for my friend, especially if it's my friend. And it's like, you know, we're taught like stand up for your friends when it's another peer, but we can't stand up to adults. So it's like, additionally, these kids feel helpless and they're like, well, I don't want that to happen to me. Like, it's hurting my friend and I want to stand up for them, but I can't because it's this adult and I don't want it to happen to me.
We also know that, like, now, years later, the girls, they don't remember, like, large swaths of any of this. And I'm just like, yep, dissociation. Don't blame ya. Me too. It's 2 days later. We get a whole big fun time jump. This episode is so weird. And we join Abby and Maddie on our production field trip for the week. It is a lunch date. And as they eat, Abby peppers Maddie with questions.
I wonder where Mackenzie was during this time.
Right? I'm just like, again, hashtag Kenzie erasure. What the fuck is with this? Poor thing. I mean, I'm sure she didn't want to be there, so I hope she got to be at the pool with, like, Clara and having a good time. But Abby peppers Maddie with questions, and she says, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Maddie says she wants to be on Broadway. And Abby's like, just on Broadway? You don't want to be on TV? You don't want to have your own show? And Maddie just like shrugs awkwardly.
She's
and
like, I'm already on TV. I already have my own
It's just like, can I just eat my Caesar salad that you made me order? I wanted a cheeseburger, but Jesus. And don't get me wrong, I know that production would have told Abby, like, oh, ask her a bunch of questions, but I also know that Abby had a specific way that she wanted Maddie to be perceived and to be featured in every episode. So production could have said to Abby, ask Maddie a bunch of questions, ask Maddie these questions. But Abby's still gonna try and do it a specific way. And the other thing about talking with a narcissist when they want to have a talk, if you can't hear the air quotes, trust me, they're there, is you don't need to be on a reality show for having a talk with a narcissist to feel overproduced. You don't need a production team for that.
No,
They trust me, they will put on a show.
I mean, it's hard because narcissists don't actually know how to have true conversation, a reciprocal relationship. So there's not going to be that verbal reciprocity, that, the genuine care.
She will ask the same questions. And
The script.
It's a script. And then I will give her the answers. And then the next time, like, even if if something new comes up in my life and I tell her about it, and then the next time I'm like, oh, well, we had to go and do that thing, she gets angry and says, like, you didn't tell me about that. And it used to be very, like, I felt very gaslighted because I would be like, did I not? I thought I told you. But now, being married to Beach Cat, I can be like, I can turn to him and be like, did I not tell her? And he'll be like, no, we definitely told her. We were right. I was right there. And now we've noticed, like, no, she just does not retain any of the information that we tell her.
Because she doesn't care.
Right, exactly. That's what we know now, is it's just like she doesn't care. They don't care. I think Abby cares a little. She cares to get Maddie to an elevated status. I don't know that I don't want to say she doesn't care about Maddie as a human being, but the way that narcissists care about people is very...
Care about what you can do for them.
And sometimes what they can do for you. Abby has always said she wanted to be the first one to go, and she wanted to leave Dance Moms first and take Maddie with her. She wanted to keep Maddie under her thumb. So in that way, it's kind of what she wanted to do for Maddie. It would have kept Maddie with her. It would have kept... So in that way, Maddie would have still been doing something for her. But that's not at all how Abby would have viewed it. And that's part of also dealing with a narcissist, is you have to be able to remind yourself of how things look to them. Otherwise, you cannot communicate with them at all. It's super fun. As the lunch continues, Abby moves on to talking to Maddie about their moms. This also gave me just the biggest ick, because she tells Maddie that having her mom be in the hospital is like Maddie having her mom choose to leave her to go be with her boyfriend, and that they're the same as each other. Rachel, is this Abby trying to connect with Maddie, or is this manipulation? Because I sometimes can't tell. Because I know that sometimes narcissists do, they see connection in the world, they see genuine human connection, and they're like, that looks nice, I wish I could have that. And then they try to get it, but because they don't have the ability, it comes off as something yucky and manipulative.
I think in particular in this case, like, it's an attempt to connect, but ultimately, like, that attempt to connect is to, like, continue to build that trust and to build that control.
Trauma bonding.
Yeah, in essence, like a codependence. And I mean, we see that so much with Abby. Like, she needs, particularly Maddie, to need her. And that's codependency.
It's now competition day, and the girls are all busy getting ready in the dressing room, with Abby yelling at them the whole time, of course. And out in the lobby, Kathy and her team arrive. Kathy tells us that she's put a lot of eggs in one basket. That quote just cracked me up. Coming all the way out here to this competition, that they have to prove to Abby that they're the better team. Nothing like both of the coaches putting immense amounts of pressure on teeny tiny little baby children. Kathy leads Vivi and Justice in some very, very weird warm-ups. These would feel like, I was like, the first few times I watched it, I was like, oh, this is normal. And then I was like, the only reason I think this is normal is because I was a theater kid. They feel like the kinds of group warm-ups that you do for a big stage musical, like when you've got a huge chorus. Like, it's a big show. The cast is huge. There's no stretching involved. She's not working their legs. They're not. This is not a body warm-up. This is just. And then, of course, she brings her dancers for the inaugural dressing room showdown with the ALDC.
It's not really a showdown.
Yeah, but you know that. Listen, you and I know that, but I'm 1,000,000% sure that Abby and Kathy think that this is like high noon at the OK Corral. They believe that this is peak drama. They enter the ALDC dressing room, and no one is happy to see Kathy. They're all like, why are you here? Don't you stay in Ohio? And Kathy immediately begins comparing the children to one another. I cannot imagine how thoroughly awful this had to have been for all of the children.
Awkward.
She makes a beat Red Taylor list off all of the titles that she's won. She tells Kenzie and Nia that Vivi and Justice will be competing against them in the duet competition. And don't get me wrong, I know that this is a production setup, but again, I cannot, it feels like, you know, when your mom ran into someone at the grocery store and it was kind of like your mom's frenemy and they're comparing like, oh, well, my kid just did this. And like, it's that, but on steroids. And I don't necessarily mean like metabolic steroids. I mean the steroid inhaler that you got for RSV, and it just it made you eat a lot and you're a little chunked out right now. Everyone's been there. It's uncomfortable, okay? Steroids happen to pretty much everybody at some time. And it's so uncomfortable to watch. The kids are just like standing there uncomfortably. Again, Taylor is bright red. Vivi just keeps like, I feel like you can watch her visibly dissociate. She's just like playing the Sesame Street song in her head or something. All of the kids are so uncomfortable. I know production had to have set this up, but I really like send the kids out of the room. Let them go play in the lobby or something. Because one thing that the kids have all said is they were all friends. No matter who was on the Candy Apples team at the time, no matter who they were competing against, they were all friends. Like, just let them go play together. Don't make them do this. The whole thing ends with Abby and Kathy, of course, in a screaming match about who has more employed dancers. And then they make fun of each other, each for something that the other one also does. It's pointless, and it's the same thing that they always do. And this didn't need to happen, but you also didn't need to have it in the episode. After Kathy leaves, Kelly and Holly start talking about Paige's solo, and Kelly tells Holly that they were able to finish the dance, so she doesn't have, you know, a choreographed piece that's long enough to compete. Abby overhears this, and she jumps. Like, she gets that look on her face that says, like, ooh, I can fuck with you about this. And she jumps at that chance to pile on Paige, and she goes, so Paige, how's the solo going? Abby, after saying this to Paige, starts in on Kelly, telling her that she's setting her kids up for failure and embarrassment, at which point Kelly loses it. She starts crying, saying she's not going to do this again. She's not going to put her kids through this another time, so she's going to go pull the solos. And as she leaves to head down to registration, Abby yells after her to stop crying because this is all her fault anyway. She sounds like a fucking 12-year-old.
I wonder if production told Abby something different than what was on the other side. Like, hey, we know that Kelly went and hired this choreographer.
I hadn't thought about that. It's time for performances, and Abby begins walking Maddie backstage for her solo. We can see that Maddie's makeup is done to imitate facial injuries. Nothing, freaky about that, or not like Maddie would have needed parental guidance, particularly this week. She's totally fine in Abby's care, safe and sound. Abby tells Maddie that this is a very important week for her and a very important number. She says that this could all mean big things for her in her future. And she says that she wants Maddie to go on stage and really show those judges that abused child. I want to beat my head against a wall. I really want you to show those judges that abused child, but it should be beautiful and they should love it. And then she begins to choke up while she's talking to Maddie, and she tells Maddie that she's making her cry. Abby then grabs Maddie from behind while she's still like choking up, and she's like, how about you do this dance for Mrs. Miller, huh? And she says this and she looks directly into the camera. It made my skin crawl. It sent off all of my narcissism sirens. Don't get me wrong, like Abby could have
do this abuse dance that ends in suicide. Do it for my dying mother.
But she like that was bad, but the looking into the camera. That for me, I was just like, and don't get me wrong, I'm aware that she could have just been looking into the camera because, like you're not used to having a camera shoot down your barrel when you're having an emotional conversation. This is still, I mean, it's been 10 weeks, but it's only been 10 weeks. You've been living the rest of your life not doing this. That's fine. Fair enough. But it's Abby, so I always question it. I'm like, yeah, she could have just been doing it because it was weird to have the camera there. But I kind of doubt it.
My guess would be that she wanted to make sure that the camera got it. Like, is this convincing enough for you, production? Is this convincing for you?
Right? Am I selling it? Do you believe me? Do you see my pain? Do you see my sacrifice? Are you not entertained? Maddie takes the stage and we get a decent shot of the dance. The choreography, I will say, I love the choreography. It's very pretty. And if she didn't have the makeup, or probably wouldn't be able to tell exactly what the story is supposed to be. Abby seems fairly happy with Maddie's performance from the audience, and when Maddie comes off stage, she starts crying. Chloe is backstage with her and gives her a hug. Maddie tells us that she was sad after she performed because she wanted her mom and wished that she had been there to watch her do this dance. Honestly, I am surprised that Maddie held it together for as long as she did this week, especially having to do this dance and deal with Abby the way that she was having to deal with that. It's now time for the duets, and Kathy is taking Vivi and Justice backstage. She tells us in an interview that they have to win, that losing is not an option because they came here to rattle the ALDC, and the only way for them to do that is by winning. There's no pressure at all on these tiny children. Vivi tells us in an interview that she thinks that she and Justice are going to beat Kenzie and Nia because all those two do is acro, backbends, and lunging. And I wanted to know, Rachel, what you thought of Vivi saying this, because Vivi has barely spoken 10 words strung together this whole season. And we also know that her dance vocabulary was seriously lacking at this period in time.
She's repeating what she's heard.
How sad is it that she's heard her mom disparage her friends so much that she can just repeat it like a parrot? Vivi and Justice take the stage, and don't get me wrong, the duet is cute if you think you're watching something from the spring dance recital. Vivi's costume makes no sense for the dance that they're doing. Vivi and Justice do the rubber arm wiggle that Vivi debuted for us in her cowgirl solo early on in the season, and they play the air guitar and they're head bobbing. It's not terrible, but it is not something you expect to see at a national dance competition in Hollywood. None of it. Like, the costume doesn't go with the dance doesn't tell a story. The two dancers, aside from the times that like Vivi literally leans on him to do her heel stretch, because I don't think she at the time can do it just standing by herself, they don't work together. And the dance doesn't tell a story. There does not seem to be a point to it. I
think Kathy was just so focused on the idea of winning that she didn't care.
when you choreograph a dance, there needs to be a point to it. You can't just choreograph a dance to win. And Abby will run into this problem as well when she starts to fall down the rabbit hole of, we've lost too many times, now I have to choreograph something to win. You can't do that. The numbers that win are something that's important and tells a story and that the kids enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
And potentially Vivi and Justice enjoyed doing this dance, but it doesn't check any of the other boxes. And Vivi's costume, like, oh, poor Vivi. Stop dressing her. Please hire Vivi as stylist. You say you have dressers for the kids at your studio. I don't believe you because this is how you dress Vivi. Are you the dresser, Kathy? Stop it. Kenzie and Nia are up next, and right before they take the stage, Maddie tells us that her sister is going to beat those apples, and it's cute. Kenzie and Nia hit the stage, and we get a very good shot of their duet. Unfortunately, this dance does continue the streak of Nia having ethnic dances every week. This one is called Snake Charmer. It's an acro number where Nia plays the charmer and Kenzie plays the snake. The girls do nail the dance, and it checks all of the boxes that Vivi's and Justice's does not. The dance tells a story. The costume makes sense for the dance. The music also goes along with it. And every time that Nia and Mackenzie are interacting, it makes sense for the story. They're working off one another. It's a good duet.
I mean, the level, like the competitive level, I feel like between the two.
Yeah.
One is much more fine-tuned.
It's now time for the junior solos, and Taylor is about to go on. Kathy tells us that this is a big moment because they're going to use Chloe's song. And I do want to preface this by saying it's not like you go to a dance competition and don't expect to hear your song more than once, typically. When we're talking about Dance Moms, they had a very limited catalog of songs that they could use that production had paid for the rights for. It would be very, very, very weird for anyone else, especially in the same age category, to be using the same song for a solo as one of their solos. It just... Taylor takes the stage, and as the song begins to play and she begins dancing, the moms and Abby in the audience immediately recognize the song, and they begin theorizing about what Kathy production did. Backstage, Chloe and Christy hear the music, and they worry that Chloe missed her call and her opportunity to compete is gone. And then they find out what's really going on. Again, I think that the person that this affected most negatively was Taylor. We obviously don't get a good shot of her dance. This is the only dance we don't get a decent shot of. We get a worse shot of her solo than we do of Vivi and Justice's duet. Even where she is shown, we don't get to focus on just her dancing because people are talking over it. Like we're distracted by that audio. We're listening to what the other people are saying so we can get the details and follow the storyline. And she was young enough to be registered in the junior category. This is a little girl. And it's just sad to me that this should have been a special moment for her. And it's reduced to this. Next up is Chloe. She takes the stage and she dances beautifully. Again, I love this solo. We can hear Abby in the audience cheering Chloe on. Every time she nails a turn section, she goes, "Yes, way to go, kid." Which, even if she does do this other times when Chloe dances, we don't usually get to hear it, so we know things are going well.
Do you think that Abby would have reacted the same way if it weren't for Kathy coming in and taking her song? Do you think that it's more of a, yes, you're doing, you're not humiliating me against Kathy?
I think it's tough to say because this was a nationals. So there's the potential that Abby was just pleased that Chloe was able to learn a solo in a short period of time, a technically difficult solo, and compete it as technically proficiently and with as good of acting as she did. Christy tells us that she just wants Chloe to dance her best and feel good about what she is doing and to come off stage with a real sense of self-confidence about what she just did. And Christy cries watching the performance, which is understandable, but we don't have to worry about missing our Melissa cliche for the week. Christy took care of that for us. It's time for the group number, and in the dressing room, the moms are getting the girls ready and telling them to remember what Shangela taught them. They need to go out there and own it. And I love that was in there. Made me happy. The girls take the stage, and we get a pretty good shot of the dance. As things begin to wind down, the performance is coming to an end. Holly tells us in an interview that she is a bit nervous that Nia won't be able to pull off the death drop. And the moment comes. Nia's the last one in the center of the stage, and she completely nails the death drop. The moms go wild. Abby whoops. The judges look stunned. Holly tells us she even heard a few gasps in the audience, and a legend was born that day. Because Nia's going to take this with her moving forward. The death drop will become a thing for Nia. I'm so glad that this was given to Nia. I'm so glad it had the effect it was supposed to. Yay. All of the yays.
Yay, our little baby.
Yay. Yay for Nia. I'm so happy. And it's time for awards. And it looks like we're doing all of the awards in one go for this competition. This is something we'll get used to in years moving forward, but I think this is the first time it happens in the series. Kenzie and Nia take first place for their duet. We do not hear about a placement for Vivian Justice. Chloe takes first place for the junior solo awards, and we don't hear anything about Taylor. Kathy tells us in an interview that she knows they put on a big act to Abby, saying how they were going to have this big battle, and now she feels embarrassed that they just got beat. Maddie's solo ends up taking second place in the mini category, and the editors, they show her making these faces on stage like she's like supposed to be shocked.
Like Michaela Maroney.
Yes. I'm not saying she didn't do this, but it could also have been the editors being icky, and I just hate the potential that the editors did that because she's a little kid. And even if she did make a face like, oh, I got caught out.
It just makes me think of the Michaela Maroney.
Yeah,
face.
like just let it go. Like, you don't need to have it in there. Abby tells us in an interview that she can't believe that Maddie got second place, and she wants to know what those judges were thinking. And then Maddie tells us in an interview that she thought that she danced the best, but she was still happy with second place. And that another time when they went to a different competition, the girl that she lost to here, so the girl that got first place at this competition, didn't even make it in the top 10 at that other competition. And that it's nice when everyone has a chance to win. This feels like Maddie at this time has a similar like vocal tell to Melissa. Like they have this like chirpy voice that they use when they're talking versus when they're like actually talking. And this is very much in Maddie's chirpy, masky voice. And I'm not even saying that Maddie was made to say these things. She very well could have felt like she deserved to win. And I'm not saying that that reflects poorly on Maddie. I think it reflects poorly on the adults around her. There is a great danger in telling a child that they are the best anything or the most important anything in any room, in any setting ever. Maddie is the most important dancer to Abby. Maddie is the most important dancer to her mom.
Which is unfortunate because she has a little sister.
Yeah, which again, hashtag Kenzie erasure, but like, she's not the most important. No one is the most important dancer at that dance competition. Not even the kids that place first. Maddie, when you place first at a dance, and I'm not talking to Maddie now, I'm saying like, I wish someone had told her then, like, Maddie, when you place first at a dance, you're not the most important dancer there. You're just first today, and that's great. But you should be the most important to you, and making sure other people feel the most important to them is extremely important. We move on to group awards, and the group dance, My Pumps, ends up taking third place. Of course, this makes Abby wildly unhappy, and she tells us that she got slapped in the face with the Maddie thing, and now the group taking third place just bowled her over, and she says that this is unacceptable. After awards, the ALDC meets up with the Candy Apples in the lobby, and Kathy initially congratulates them on their wins, before saying that at least she can go home and fix what her kids did wrong, but that Abby can't fix. Bleep. She says something that they had to bleep out, and it wasn't at a time where I could see her mouth, so I can't tell what she said. She says it in front of everyone, all of the kids, all of the moms, and then she walks off. And Abby tells the moms that she cannot believe that Kathy is a full-grown adult woman that is allowed to teach children. And as much as I agree with this assessment, it coming from Abby it feels like something out of the Twilight Zone. Like, pot meet kettle. You are the same color. As they're leaving the competition, Kathy tells us that we haven't seen the last of her. And I really, really wish we had.
Like, I really wish that were not true.
Back in the dressing room, Abby is debriefing everyone, and she makes a big deal of saying that Maddie accepting second place was better and more important than her winning any first place award. And then she says nothing about Nia and Mackenzie and Chloe winning. Abby goes on to start in on Kelly again, making fun of her choice in choreographers, like it was Kelly's choice at all. And Kelly responds by saying that all she wants is for Abby to spend the same time on Paige that she spends on all the other kids. And Abby responds by saying that Kelly is enabling her children's stupidity before starting to yell at her that her mom is in a hospital somewhere and that she should be there and not here dealing with this. She looks so sad, and it looks like a stock photo of, like, if you Googled child of divorce or child of broken home, that picture of Kenzie would pop up. Because that's what these situations, that's what it makes the kids look like. Like, they're so sad.
Kenzie erasure.
Hashtag Kenzie erasure. Like, this is the most Kenzie gets featured in the whole damn episode, and her duet, they dressed her like a snake, and then her sitting with her fingers in her ears. Chrissy tells Abby that all the kids crave her attention and approval, and Abby responds, "Good, let them keep craving it." And Chrissy also says that Abby doesn't get this because Abby's not a parent. And I think a lot of people think that, like, narcissists, if they had children, they'd be able to develop some empathy, some sympathy. And not all narcissists are bad parents. Some are able to get help or recognize patterns of behavior and try and work through them. But a narcissist having a child does not mean that they will develop empathy. If Abby had a child, maybe she'd understand some things more, but chances are she wouldn't. That's not the magic ticket to solving all of Abby's problems. Abby also saying that she wants the children to continue to crave her attention, but then getting upset when the children get burnt out and no longer respond to her reminded me of that study with the baby in the high chair and the parent that, gives them attention, and then the parent goes like static quiet, and the baby starts reaching out and trying to engage, and then eventually the baby's like, okay, you're not going to do anything, I'll also sit here. Abby expects the children to continue to, play the dancing monkey for her and try to appease her for decades of their life. What's often going to happen, and what we see most often in the case of this small group of girls, is eventually they're going to be like, no, you're not going to pour into me. I'm done pouring into you. Kelly goes on to say that if Abby or Gianna treated Paige, she's telling Abby this, if you or Gianna treated Paige and Brooke like you treat Maddie and Mackenzie, I wouldn't have had to have hired the choreographer. And Abby asks Gia, she says, Gia and Maddie have a special relationship. And Kelly goes, well, I would like for my kids to have a special relationship. Which, again, since we know that they're family friends, it's not like she's being demanding. It seems weird that they don't. And Abby goes, Gianna, what did Kelly buy you for Christmas? And you watch Kelly, she shakes her hand. She's like, oh my God, no. She goes, I shouldn't have to buy her anything special for Christmas. She's a fucking teacher. Which I felt so deep in the, bottom of my soul, the pit of my soul. Like, no, you should not have to bribe any educator to treat your child with basic human decency. Abby, of course, because Kelly said the F word, this has breached the Abby is allowed to swear but no one else is rule. And
rules for thee and not for me.
Yep, and so Abby just stands up and she says, "That language is not allowed at my studio. I'm sorry, ladies." And she leaves the room. God. And in an interview, Abby tells us that she doesn't know how they're possibly going to go from third place to first place in 1 week on the road, and that she's distraught. And that is the end of the episode. I don't know, Ray. What do you think?
I feel bad for Kathy's kids.
Dude, me too.
Because I think that she is so focused on getting back at Abby that it's at her kids' expense.
The hot button topics are ones that we have covered before. Suicidal ideation in children, child abuse. So all of those will be in our link tree. Should we maybe throw something fun in there this week and put some information about, I don't know, drag queen, story time, something fun, but also educational for our Shangela friends that would like to learn more about what drag performance really can be and not what people like to try and paint it as. Rachel, what's your takeaway from the episode?
Stop comparing your kids.
Stop comparing your kids. Mine is be gone, Kathy, before someone drops a house on you. Please. Anyway, this has been a wild ride. Join us next time for the penultimate episode of the season.
Yay.
As always, I have been Kacie, not Rachel.
And I have been Rachel, not Kacie.
We'll see you next time. Bye.
CBT in the TV is hosted by Rachel Sprague and Kacie Campbell. Our show is produced by Rachel Sprague, Kacie Campbell, and Yakov Paley. Editing by Yakov Paley. Our theme song was written, composed, and performed by Emily McNally. Please join us on Instagram and TikTok at CBT in the TV for even more fun and access to the resources mentioned in today's episode. Thanks for joining us.